So before we start, I just want to speak directly to you, Peter. I think both Sebastian and I feel that you worked so incredibly hard on this film. It was incredibly hard to get many of these interviews. You fought really hard to get them. It was almost impossible to raise money, and I want to hold my hands up because many of you in the room donated money to make this film. It's been incredibly hard to get it into any film festivals, and I want to hold my arms up. James, to Salt Spring Film Festival for holding it. And it's such an important topic. There is so much more to this story than Peter was able to capture. And I know Seb and I would be happy to field a lot of questions that have ensued since the 2008. And it's not as if we didn't try personally and through the Riding Association and through just about every means to try and get this story out to Canadians, including I called up every single and wrote every single Liberal MP that I'd worked with that had supported me in my election. And just for the record, not one single member of the Liberal Party that I worked with has ever communicated with me since the day that I lost that election. Just for the record. Just for you also to understand that this isn't a problem just of the Conservative Party. This is a political problem. The reason that nothing has been done is because every single party relies on micro-targeting in order. It's such a weapon. It is such a tool to win elections. And if you think robocalls are important, wait till you see what Facebook can do in terms of the very narrow micro-targeting. And I just wanted to, before we put it out to questions, and I also want to acknowledge Seb, that Sebastian joined my campaign pretty fresh out of law school and was absolutely there from the start and collected the affidavits and pushed to get this thing recognized by the RCMP, along with the NDP, along with the other parties that were saying, oh, something's wrong. Really want to hold my hands up to Will Horder at Dogwood Initiative. Seb's filed all those affidavits. The RCMP did nothing. Elections Commissioner is even less effective than came across. They were being kind. But also, the Liberal Party did nothing. It did nothing. Except at the Riding Association level with Paul McKivitt. But at the upper level, it did nothing. And the reason being is that the Liberal Party now have probably the most sophisticated database now. I think they've surpassed Sims in its sophistication. But I think the other thing I wanted to just mention before we put it to questions and answers is that out of that election, we had quite a lot of operatives, young political science people starting, either working in the communications. My communications manager was a fellow called Ray Larson. He went on to work for SCL. Any of you who know of SCL, that was one of the big companies that helped on swaying the British voters to vote for Brexit. Jeff Sylvester was the communications manager for Keith Martin. He went on to set up Aggregate, which was also one of the key named data analytics that went on to affect a whole lot of different things. One of the young political scientists volunteers in our campaign was Chris Wiley, who went on to set up Cambridge Analytica. Kit Spence, I totally, because Kit Spence was my second campaign manager. He was sort of appointed after my first campaign manager died. Kit Spence works in the Ukraine. He's been linked with Paul Manafort. Like, political operatives are just doing their job, and they're doing their job within a set of political regulations that exists, or lack thereof. And so this isn't just a situation that is, and I want to make this really clear, this isn't just about the Conservative Party. This is about all parties that are forced into using a really manipulative, coercive micro-targeting that is aimed at voter suppression. And for anyone, if they want to really understand the numbers and the numerics of voter suppression, go and see is it the Great Hack, the Giant Hack? In a section of that film, there's a picture of the United States that shows all the swing ridings, and then shows the percentage of the swing voters within those swing ridings that can influence the election. And it's a numbers game. Political science is named that way for a very good reason, because it is about numbers. So really, the reason that micro-targeting works so well is that you're really boiling it down to influencing the swing voters in the swing ridings in order to swing the votes in these very narrow ridings. And that's exactly what happened in Canada, and that's what continues to happen. It's happened in every single election. We're continuing to be micro-targeted, and we're continuing to have these very narrow margins that can really affect. And we will not have a democracy, and nothing has changed since 2008. It's just got worse. And we haven't even talked about all the other forms of voter suppression that went on during our election. One of the key things is about third-party financing. Seb and I caught them red-handed, creating bogus third-party organizations that then went on to spend a lot of money to enhance their the finance and the kind of war chest available. Well, those third-party organizations were all set up by the same lawyer who was connected to the SNC-Lavalin head, Gwyn Morgan. Gwyn Morgan is a big financier of the Preston Manning Institute for Supporting Democracy. Well, guess where they also get their money? From the Koch brothers at the time. We had a guy that went undercover to one of the Preston Manning democracy training workshops. And that's where he learned to do voter suppression. He was then targeted, and his life was made hell. So we have evidence of actually the Preston Manning School teaching how to do electoral fraud and voter suppression. None of this, even though you get it into the press, you have evidence, none of it sticks. None of it gets picked up by mainstream media. I know none of you are surprised by this, but it's such a bigger story than we really understand. And I think what Peter's done is he's done an amazing job of actually documenting the evidence for that first step that people need to take. They need to see the evidence, and they need to take that first step to believe that, oh, maybe we don't have such a great democracy. And then they need to start connecting the dots between oil, big corporations, SNC-Lavalin. Everything that you see that has been going on is completely predictable. Everything from Jody Wilson-Raybould's, discrediting, right up to Cambridge Analytica's role and the Ukraine's role in Trump. They're all linked. A lot of those operatives are the same, and it all started, a lot of it in Canada, right here.
Thanks everybody for being here. I don't think is this mic'd for here? Okay, so this is more for this camera, so I'll project more this way. I want to acknowledge today where we are in Coast Salish territory. Grateful to be here. Grateful for all of you for making the time to see this film. Grateful for Peter for making this film, and for Frank and everybody across this country, including a lot of you in this room who supported this film. This is journalism at its core. And without this story, stringing it together, you don't get the full scope of the picture. And so I'm grateful for all the supporters. Also want to say that this story gets even deeper in so many ways. But the worst of it, I think, the worst of it is all the people who put all this effort, volunteers who knock on doors, candidates who give up years of their lives, and then this kind of stuff happens, right? So there's a big price to pay for this type of cheating, but I think we all understand that the stakes are high and people will stoop to those levels to win elections. But the worst of it, I think, for me, is these systems that are meant to protect us don't. So when we file complaints, they don't investigate. And the proof of it is that a couple of years ago, Senator Duffy, in his trial, for these campaign expenses, around 2008, he actually came around this riding, or just shortly after, for the Saanich Fair. And the Olympics were about to kick off in 2010. And so he was told, you know what, don't show up to the Saanich Fairgrounds. We want our local candidate to get the attention. But he still made his trip out here and visited with family and stuff. So he was being investigated for coming out here and spending tax dollars on, what is party business. Anyhow, he was acquitted of that, okay? So this is 2-3 years ago?
Yeah.
In the case, though, he said that in 2008, that a black operative team from the Conservative Party in Ottawa had done robocalls in our riding. And I remember finding out this news and going, oh my gosh, Briony, we now know who did this. We never knew if it had been a disgruntled, NDP perhaps, who'd put out these calls because they were upset that, just the way the campaign went. We never knew who had done this. We thought it was probably the Conservatives, but we wrote to Elections Canada and said, you have a sitting senator who under oath has now said that it's the Conservative Party. It's in the judgment. In the judgment, you can see the court case. I could cite you the paragraph. I don't have it right now, but it says that this senator admitted that the Conservative Party cheated in 2008 in this riding. And you know what? They rolled back to us and said, we're sorry. There's a statute of limitations. It's been over 5 years. We can't look into it.
And we don't even know if that's actually legal.
Yeah.
That
And it's like Michael Harris in this film. He says, if there's a crime, if somebody gets beaten, a woman gets raped, a child gets molested, it could be 20 years down the line. If you get that evidence, you're going to prosecute it. So why is our democracy? Why can we accept that? Now, I do believe the statute of limitations has been erased now in the new version of the Elections Act. But just to say that these things can happen and they have a cost. And but I do also want to just give a chance to Frank to perhaps say a few words. Frank, please. This is a man with Peter who traveled across this country. They hit the road. A lot of these hours are unpaid. These are the heroes who tell the stories. And I just would love Frank to say just a few words about his journey and Peter's.
I was just the location sound person for most of the interviews that you saw here today. Peter is a person who requires a lot of respect for his dedication to this project, which has taken him many, many years of his life, and he went deaf on the road traveling from Ottawa to Whitehorse, and he now relies on a hearing aid in one ear, which has about 30% hearing left, to continue his work. He uses a Bluetooth interface so that he can actually hear the clips in the film. But his dedication is what's really a marvelous thing to bring, this travesty of our democracy to light. Thank you.
Questions? Do you want to field them, James?
I have two questions. How is this film available for people to see?
So this was the international premiere, folks.
So to follow up on that, I'm a filmmaker, and probably my statistics aren't right, but apparently 1 out of every 200, 250 films that get screened at a film festival, one of those gets picked up. So this is a grand opportunity to see this, and my frustration as a filmmaker is that stuff gets lost at this point in the whole exposure of the information, right? So that's why I would just love to be able to show this film to my friends in the States. And my second question is, is this part of trying to help people wake up in terms of the 2020 election in the States right now? I know in the film festival there's quite a lot of these, this sort of theme of wake up, the political system matters. were you thinking about the 2020 election in the States when you screened this?
No, I mean, we got asked questions at corporate coup d'etat yesterday as well. You know, Fred Peabody got some fairly pointed questions about his film in the 2020 election, and we have no idea what'll happen in that election. And we saw these films come across our plate, and we chose the best films, but we weren't consciously choosing. There's no way we can. We chose these films even in last October, November, and so I think we'll point the questions back to this film, especially for these guys. So who's got another one? How about in the back? Yeah.
I want to say that I agree that Peter did an amazing job with a complicated subject to make it very understandable and captivating in its own way. I want to ask a question about another type of suppression. So I was in Ottawa working for the federal government during that period of time. And when they were, one of the things that happened was to get rid of information and then hire a lot of lawyers in justice right around that time. So they shut down the way that employees could save information on servers. They stopped keeping backups. They started to delete things. They reduced the amount of space that was available and made people get rid of emails. So from a legal or journalistic point of view, it means that information is going to be really hard to get access to. Then they hired lots of people in Justice Canada. And so I look at this and I think, okay, you just ran this campaign, it goes on in your life. This has become a big part of your life, which you never anticipated. What about suppressing people from fighting and taking a political position? Like, you know, is this part of it?
Yeah, so I'll see if I can summarize in case Peter didn't hear the the question. What about the impact on suppressing people that are going to get involved with politics, for example? The reason I had to leave is that I'm still traumatized from my experience. I lost a lot going through this election, emotionally, financially. I lost a lot of work. I couldn't teach at the university. I lost a lot of my writing gigs. I lost all my government work. I was in really pretty dire circumstances, and some of the people in this room will know because I was broke when I came out of it, because in an election you have to put a lot of your money, I think I lost about $50,000, all my savings. These are the realities of running as a candidate, and they don't really tell you that. But it is a form of voter suppression that if you aren't even able to run in a fair election, I could have handled the fact that I lost a lot, but that I at least been running in a fair election, but I didn't. And that was the killing thing. And the second killing thing is that the way that the system works, and any of the, you know, the political operatives coming out of the States will tell you this in the Dirty Tricks campaign, is that the way to shut up the person that's lost is to call them a poor loser. Oh, he's just a poor loser. He's a whiner. She's a whiner. It's so easy to discredit a person that is lost in an election. You can even to go into, I didn't even want to go into the grocery stores for a long time because people would sort of say, oh, she lost the election. Oops, sorry, or avoid you, or, you know, there was just like so many aspects to this. And would I recommend to a young up and coming socially minded person, young woman, even because it's even worse as a woman, to run? I would say no. Honestly, I would say no. And that is a form of voter suppression.
I think also the question was, if you or I or any of us choose to fight, like you're saying, to approach election 10 and say, here, we have hard evidence for you. They have two methods, it seems. One is to just shuffle it off and say, okay, thanks, good, leave us alone. And the other one is they lawyer up and it gets lost in a shuffle, but they just have a bigger fighting team.
You know, I agree, and I would say that they just have a lot more money, because the reality is if we had unlimited funds, we'd probably be fighting this tooth and nails, and we just don't have the same amount of resources. So yeah, it's an uphill battle for sure. There's a couple of questions.
I just want to ask, what can the people in this room do besides voting for this film as the best or favorite film to ensure that you guys can show this? You should be showing this in Guelph. If you don't show this in Guelph, in Ottawa, in Toronto, it's great that you're showing it on Salt Spring, but what can we do anything what to help get this film shown in Guelph?
You know, I'll just, so the question is, how can we get this shown across the country? And I'll say that in Guelph, they've had sort of a pre-screening of this film. So this is the official release at a film festival, but Peter has been so generous in honoring the communities that supported him. I mean, you see so many clips in here. He may have made this film 5 or 10 minutes shorter, but there's so much beauty and there's so much honoring in this film, and there's so many stories. And so how do we get this film shown across the country? I'm not a filmmaker. I don't know this process for doing that, but I do acknowledge that that's something that needs to happen on behalf of all Canadians.
I just say that when in the earlier permutations of this film, Peter brought it out and we set up panels. We got a lot of the big data people like Michael Vaughan from the BC Federal Civil Liberties Association. We had some top-notch academics who've been working on this issue. We held open media, where people could go online and see the panel and question the panel. We did a lot in the ensuing years to try and get the word out. This is a really, really tough issue to get into the public consciousness. And even after the 2011 election, and even after the Duffy, I remember when the Duffy decision came out, I was actually, I think there was one or two phone calls that came from CBC to interview me, say, "Oh, well, you've been vindicated. What do you think?" And I was backpacking, and I got in about 8 days after I was out of the thing, and I got back in, and I phoned up. I saw these phone calls like, "Phone CBC," and I phoned CBC, and they said, "Oh, well, we've passed the news cycle date." So okay. Glad we got the smoking gun, we got the guys, we got the outfit, so it's, I don't know, I wish I had an answer, but I have no answer. You can look, Seb and I, we've tried, we're exhausted, Peter's exhausted, who knows?
Just about in general, documentary films, especially independent films like this. So starting in your own backyard, like Salt Spring deserves another screening of this, obviously. And Film Fest is here to help. We have equipment. We have a network that we can get out to on social media. And I think that taking that work out of Peter's hands and out of anyone's hands and contacting him and saying, "I want to host a screening. Can I have the film?" That's the easiest thing. Contacting your friends, contacting your networks, institutions out there that can show the film, other festivals. That is the best way. Because if we say to Peter, "Hey, we think you should show this in Powell River," his hands are tied. The amount of work it takes him to do, whereas for us on the ground to host screenings, and you can contact the library here and pressure them to get the film. It's easy for them because they don't have to negotiate a distributor. They just have to contact Peter and get a copy. So for sure, we'll recommend that to them, but the more people that ask the library to get it, they can get it. But hosting screenings and getting people talking about it is another great way.
Yeah, this obviously needs a lot more publicity exposure across the country. But fortunately, there is something I think we can all do to guard against these forms of voter suppression. They only work if one party can identify who are the people likely to vote against them. So don't give them that information. And if someone calls, claiming to be the NDP party or the Conservative Party and asks you your voting intentions, don't tell them. Or they're a polling, a survey company, don't tell them. It's a secret vote, keep it secret.
I just want to say it's too late. It's too late.
Okay.
Yeah, these databases are incredible. And the other thing that we found out over the years is that what happens is that something like, the Kiwanis Club, these databases are augmented by buying up and having friendlies in people that are managing other data sets from organizations like Kiwanis or, and they found all sorts of ways, whether it's membership and affiliation in religious organizations. And the thing is that we're actually pretty predictable in whether we are a conservative hardcore or a swing voter or a conservative, NDP. We're actually very predictable. So once there's something known about somebody and it's on the database, it doesn't go away and you won't change.
Every time you like on Facebook.
Facebook is now absolutely. So just to give you, I just want to finish on really quickly on that. The reason Facebook is so effective is because of so much little analytics that feed into a value system. What they found, what Chris Wiley found with his contact when he was in Cambridge, was that your value system in your voting was pretty much correlated with which character that you liked in the Game of Thorns. Is it the Game of Thorns? Thrones. Tells you how much thorns. That was Freudian slip. So that they could anticipate who you were going to vote, or whether you were a swing voter, or whether you're conservative, or whatever, just by which character you pick. So all you had to do is put a fake game out into the Facebook, world, and try this and see who you line up with. That gave them every bit of information they needed. So yes, don't give them information out, but that's for the new voter. For the old voters, too late, folks. They know exactly who you are.
I just wanted to echo what James said, and I was thinking to myself that several thousand emails contained to Knowledge Network, CBC, PBS could invite them to request this film. And I also wanted to ask the obvious question, what do you guys recommend that Canadians we could do in the future going forward besides hiding our information to help us make things better? I mean, what are your suggestions? What have you learned?
I think I've learned that a lot of Canadians are apathetic when it comes to protecting their democracy. When it comes to fighting carbon taxes and things like that, people will stand up. But when it comes to protecting democracy, it's just like, And I just don't think maybe in the States it's gotten a higher profile. Maybe we're not there yet. I'm hoping we're hitting a tipping point in Canada where we're realizing, because of these movies, that we need to start protecting our democracy, just like our forefathers and mothers did. But this is where it's happening. So be vigilant and tell your friends about it. Get upset. Like, some people protested. We protested. We went to Elections Canada. We were in Market Square in Victoria. We made a bit of a ruckus. Some people did across the country, but we got to keep doing that. We got to protect this institution of our vote, of our to decide who our lawmakers are. I think we have a question in the back.
Yeah, I noticed that we have I don't mean to insult anybody, but we have maybe one young person here. This is sad. Is there any way that we can get this video to young people? Okay. And just a quick observation, when I talk to young people about any kind of activism, I say, what you've got to remember is you're working on your time, you're fighting somebody who's being paid to say no. And that's an important thing.
I'll just address the first one. The second part of this, Harry brings up a point. Getting the video out there, obviously in the next year, it'll be crucial to host these screenings and get it out there, keep the discussion going. My counsel to Peter will be, hey, put it on YouTube, make it available for free for everyone to see. It worked for Alexander Morton's films that she helped work on. And once that happens, that is up to you to send it out, get it as wide and far as possible. Mostly on social media it happens then. And it's totally possible that millions of people could see this film. And it's up to all of us to make it happen.
Take one or two more questions?
Yeah.
Perhaps if people do that, if they make a link to other very potent films on the same topic, such as The Great Hack and even The Story of Facebook, that would be a great idea. And my initial thought was, Briony, everything you went through in pursuing this initially, were you harassed, threatened during the election? Digging afterwards.
Was I harassed or threatened? No, I'm not a threat. I am such small. Like, just to give you an example of how unimportant I am, really, you can tell if you're important if someone like CBC takes your call. Or, someone picks up, like I've been writing articles on this stuff. I've been doing as much investigative journalism as I can. Of course, I'm discredited because people just see me as being a sore loser who's trying to, and so even trying to take it out. So have I been harassed? Not really, because I'm not a threat. But, someone like, if Chris Wiley, for example, like the saddest thing in my, is why didn't Chris Wiley go to the good side instead of the dark side? Well, the answer is very simple. He was paid on the dark side. So the question is, what should we do? The good side should be financing, and in fact, my nephew is working right now and with on AI and with some really good people to try and see if this can be a force for good instead of just a force for bad. We're in this era, and we have got to understand, like, we really were deer in the headlights, caught unawares, had no clue what was going on. I don't think the Electoral Commissioner had a clue what was going on. He kept saying, oh, the only fraud we've had is when someone, tries and steals a ballot box, and drags it outside or something. I was like, oh my God. So we've had, and all we have to do is go down to the United States and you can learn everything you needed to know. After all this happened, I started reading and thinking, Jesus, what was the Electoral Commissioner doing? He should have been frigging reading what's going on in the States. They've been doing it for decades. And it's true. The best quote was the guy saying, I feel like I'm, coming up from a dystopian, telling his little hobbits how the world works. All true. All true. And I think that we have to get, like, my number one thing is regulation. And I am so unimportant that I can't even get a return phone call, even from people like Carolyn Bennett, who is like my buddy. I was a little star candidate for a while. Never got a phone call back, but I would love to have an hour with her and talk to her about what's happened and the implications. It's not that she doesn't know this stuff, but it's the fact that they can't do without it. And that is a big problem, folks. So we've got to welcome them in, every political party, and say, okay, guys, we know you got a problem. The show is being run by these operatives. They're all young 20-somethings. They know all their algorithms. They can manipulate the heck out of everybody. We all got to live with this. How are we going to make it better? And that is where I think it's got to be a cross-party, cross-discipline, cross-everything attempt to regulate this, because otherwise we're done.
We're going to wrap it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Brian.